Hi friends, and welcome to my weekly live stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Labat. I'm the CTO of the Uno platform open source project, and I spent about an hour or so every week taking a look at the Uno platform, live coding, taking a look at issues, uh, looking at pull requests and others. And this week we're going to be continuing the what we were looking at last week, which was the support for localizing attached properties in XAML. This is very specific, but it's an interesting issue because last week what we were looking at were a few issues around the way where we were able to debug or not debug source generators. So we're going to be diving into this. I don't have any specific updates for this week, aside from the fact that there's a lot of activity that's happening on the .NET repo, on the Uno platform repo, and making way for a newer release of Uno. So we're going to be talking about this next week, most likely. So let's just jump right into our issue. So last week we were looking at that specific issue, which is the support for XAML resources on attached properties. And the idea is that you can, for instance, in this case, make a button have an XUID, which is the ability to tag a specific UI element on a XAML control and on XAML page, and then be able to specify on that button that you will specify here, use an attached property to set, for instance, the tooltip that should open on top of that specific control. So you can see here that we're defining that button without any UID, and then it has to happen and be visible in that case with just the fact that we have set the resource in the resw file. So we're going to try to figure why this is not working. And last week what we found out is that the code that's supposed to be doing that specific feature, that enable that specific feature, is supposed to be there. It is there, but it's not doing anything. So we're going to try to figure out what's happening and why we're not able to get all of that working. So I see IO Subs is here. Hello, thanks for joining. And so let's go to the Uno solution. So I'm just going to be reopening solution so that you'll see where I got this. So I'm opening the Uno solution using the folder viewer, and then I'm opening, as always, the file here. So cross-targeting override. I'm overriding the Uno target framework override so that we're only opening the solution in a specific mode, which is the mode that we're going to be that is used to do some UI testing, unit testing. And then we open the solution using a solution filter here, which is the unit test filter. So it's going to be opening just a small portion of the solution so that we get to only do some unit testing. So let's reopen that one again. So what we found out last week is that in the XAML file generators, we should have been hitting some part of the generation in here, which is the ability to generate resources when we match resource keys. And in that case, we're not finding that full key for some reason. So we're going to try to figure out why we're not getting through that specific piece of code. So the first thing is try to understand why we weren't able to debug last week the generators, and I'm not too sure exactly why. So we're going to try to figure this one out. So to be able to debug in general, and we're going to get to some point where we had a PR this week by Yusuf and Haven DV that added support for unit testing generators in a context of the solution, and it's easier to debug. But I want to make sure that we're able to debug this, and maybe there's something that we can't do in that case. So I just don't want to go to that point yet, but we'll see. So let's go back to our source generators. We had added a new test, which is called when empty XUID, and let me see. Was it that one? I'm not sure. Let's go back. Oh no, I stashed the changes. So let's restore those changes. There we go. Okay, so it's one XUID and attached property, so it should be somewhere in there. Okay. Okay, so we have our control here, and we have our test. So the test is one attached property with XUID, given that we have an XUID, and we should be having a localized value of the tooltip on button 1 when we have loaded everything up, and it's not working. So when we look in here, we have an open videos button, and we have just a field modifier. This is something that's not used a lot, but if you don't know about it, it allows for the field generated when you have an X name to have a modified a field modifier, so you can access the button 1 property outside of the control itself. And it's in that case, that's what we need, because we're creating control and we want to be able to access that specific field. When in this case it wasn't built, so it's still with the squigglies, but it will get updated once we build. So, well, let's do it again. Let's run the build again to see if we have something that works properly. So the build is getting actually a lot faster than it used to be. And I found out this week that we're actually not having something done right, and we're probably going to be changing that. So let me show you. When we have the CPU here, you can see that there's csc.exe that runs, and the reason for csc.exe to run, the reason why it runs is that the compiler detects that there are some files that are not supposed to be there, and that conflicts with the compiler itself. And then it says we can't use vbcs compiler.exe. So we're gonna make that change actually, so we're building faster. And the point would be that when we have vbcs compiler.exe, is that you can take reuse the fact that the compiler is already loaded and goes faster to build, because it will have a lot of things that are already loaded in memory, and won't spend time doing things over and over. You can see here that CSC is running again. So we're going to make that change. Okay, so it's still building because we're building everything. We got to the test, and we can see the CSC is still running. And there we go. So it should be running the test soon enough. Okay, so the test failed, and we can see that the localized value, localized value for the tooltip is actually null. Okay, so what we want to do first is determine if we're getting to through the piece of code that we've defined here. So let's just put a breakpoint. Actually, I don't think we can put a breakpoint here, but let's enable the debugging for that piece. So I don't think I have enabled the debugging here, so I'm going to show you where to enable that again. Talked about this last time, but it's a good thing to be reminded of this. So let's go to documentation, and we have in fundamentals, we have contributing, and there's a bit of generators. We should have sorted that. Let's see. Debugging generator, troubleshooting, source generation. There it is. And then there's a attribute that you can set to debug the XAML source generator. So let's try it again, because last week it didn't do what we expect it to be. So we're just going to take this and go to our block here. Though I'm not sure if we're going to get to everything that we need, but let's see. Let's say that we rebuild for now and see if that helps. If we actually go through that portion here. So that means that when I'm going to be rebuilding, so it's rebuilding a second time every time. Not too sure exactly what that does. That Visual Studio, you build once, then the second time it will rebuild again, and then the third it's going to pick up the fact that there were changes done previously. Anyways, that's what Visual Studio does. Maybe there's something that we can adjust there, but we'll see. Okay, so we're still getting CSC. Should have changed that before. Actually, let's do this right now. So in the generators here, when we're building with Roslyn generators, there's a Microsoft Code Analysis here. And that Microsoft Code Analysis doesn't have the exclude assets runtime set. And the reason we need this is that when you take a look at the output folder here, you're going to see that there's a lot of other binaries that are present in that folder. So we're going to see code analysis and Visual Basic and things like that. They're related to Roslyn itself, but that shouldn't be in that folder. And what happens is that Visual Studio or the Roslyn compiler is going to try to pick up those files, and it's trying to load them up inside of the process that is currently running the compiler. And it's going to do, it's going to say, oh, there's two of the same file with the different versions. So I don't know what to do with that. So I'm bailing out of the reuse for this so that it doesn't break, but it makes it slower. So when we set the code analysis exclude assets to runtime, it allows us to build the generator, but to not have those files in the output. So when we rebuild, you're going to see that those files are going to disappear. There you go. So they're gone. So there's a lot less files. There are a few that are still there, but they're not supposed to be relevant to the compiler, to the generator. And when we rebuild, now it should be behaving a bit differently now. So let's see. And you can see now that the compiler is going to vbcscompiler.exe. So that's something that I figured out this weekend, because I saw that the compiler was marking a few error messages that were there, saying it's not supposed to happen. I have duplicate files, so I'm not using what they're calling the hosted compiler. So now it's using the hosted compiler. So that means that everything that's happening in that process stays loaded, and then when the build comes again, then when the build started again, then a lot of the references and files and others are already loaded, and it makes the compilation a bit faster. The side effect of this is that the generators are kept in memory. So there are some interesting bugs that are, and probably going to be, we're going to be seeing that one here. So when the compiler is up, there's a static member that shouldn't be there. So I'm going to be removing that for now, but just so you know. So this is going to be fixed in the next version of Uno, so that files are the generators are building correctly and using hosted compilation. So this is another PR, but I thought it wouldn't happen this time, but it does. So let's keep it for next week. Okay, so we're building again. So this time, when we're going to get to the point where we are into the Uno UI test project, the debugger should show up, and we're going to attach to it and try to debug the solution. So let's say we open. Let's open that one. So that was the test solution that we had on the other one, but let's see if we can debug that properly. So it looks like the symbols are the right ones, which is good. So let's see if we can get to our generator here. So we were talking about that line. So 4866. And we're going to see if we can, if we're hitting that line specifically. So we'll let the generator running. Okay, so we can see that we hit only one. So here I'm hitting another XUID, which is not the one that I want to troubleshoot. So what I'm going to do is add a condition and say that the UID name should be the one that I'm looking at, because we're actually, that specific project that we're debugging has a lot of XAML files, so with a lot of XUIDs and others, and it's not the one that we're looking for. So let's go and look for that open video button here and see if we can match that. So let's go. So it should be a bit slower now because it's evaluating UID name every time. And there you go. Okay, so we're hitting our breakpoint here. So we have open videos button. The member is command parameter. Okay, so it's evaluating all the parameters, all the properties that are on that specific one. So if we look at the outside, we're looking at all the candidate properties that are available for that specific member. And we're going to try to localize the properties that are available here. And it looks like we don't have any of those that are available here. So we have the command parameter, content, language, tag, access key, and data context, and those are part of not the one that we want. We want tooltip, tooltip service.tooltip, and it's not part of the list. So that explains why we're not getting to the fact that we can match the attach property here, which is if the owner here is an attached property, and we can see here that the owner is not an attached property, probably. What is it? So owner is null. Okay, so owner is null, so we're not going to get anything useful here. And owner is probably the first parameter. Okay, so it's the first parameter, and we're getting null at that point, which cannot work. Okay, so that specific function is supposed to be the one that does the mapping of properties that are not found in the XAML. So this is exactly the location that we're looking for, but for some reason we're not getting to that proper list. So maybe it's related to that localized property here, that find localizable properties, that's not giving us the right list. So let's see, what do we have in that specific location here? So we find localizable properties. Find localizable properties, and we're looking at properties directly on the type. So that means that we're not looking at properties that may be localizable given the resource found in the file, in the resource file, which is not what we're looking for. So this is clearly incorrect. Maybe there's something else that we can find. So we should be looking at properties that are from the resource file, not the other way around. And that's what is happening here. So if we look at the build localize value, there are 4 references for this one. And there's only one that gives us, that uses the first parameter, which should be the owner. And in that case, it's definitely not giving us what we need. So that's interesting because we had implemented that originally, and for some reason the code is not used. So that's very interesting. So we're looking for properties that are on the type itself, that are candidate properties, but they're not available. They're not available completely. So let's try something first, because we were able to build this, but let's see if we add the property directly on the button, if it gets localized or not. Could be a workaround, but we're still going to be implementing the feature completely. But let's see if we can get that running. So on that button, what we want is to set the tooltip property. So that will be the one that we found here. So let's use the localized version of this. So that would be the tooltip service.tooltip. So we're going to take this declaration and put it on the button. And we're going to say original string, for instance. And let's see if we specify the tooltip directly what does happen. So let's try to build this and see what happens. I didn't see Micknitz. Hello, Micknitz. Thanks for joining. So still building. So you can see that the build this time went a lot faster because we didn't have to change we didn't change anything in the generators or others. Okay, so you can see now that it worked. So if you want to have a localized value for this, what happens is that you can set. So if you set the value in the XAML, then the original string that we specified here is going to be picked up and changed into the new one, and so it will get the localized value that we provided here. So it's kind of a workaround. So if you want to localize that value, given that you have an XUID, you can just specify the property, the attached property, and then it's going to get localized. But it's not good enough because it's, if you specify something in the resources file, it should work without the name being specified. So what we're going to do is create a second. We're going to create a second button. We're going to call button 2. We're going to keep the same UID because that we can do, and then we're going to be removing the string from that one, from that instance, and create the second test. So we're going to assume that button 2 should also have the localized value, but this time we're going to see that the test will fail because the button will not have the tooltip set at the right value. So there we go. Okay, and the test will hopefully fail again. Okay, so we can see that even if we set it to another control, the first control will fail and will not provide the values for the first one. Okay, so what we should be looking at is the fact that in that method for build localized properties, we're not finding the properties that are not directly on the type. So when we say that, we say find localizable properties here, and it doesn't give anything with regards to that specific property because we can't find it for that control specifically, or for that XUID. So we should be modifying that method, or maybe make a second one, because we have a problem here, because we're looking for a build localized resource value, and that one only works when owner is different from null. So this is a bit interesting because we don't have the owner being defined in that context, where the object definition should be that one, should be the definition that we have here. So we should be able to specify that the owner of the object should be this one, and this instance, but it's not. So when we search for localized values, what we do have is a way to get to resources that are known, and we can find them using resource keys. So this is all the resource keys that are known to the app, and we're trying to find one that matches our UID and that matches the using name that is defined here. So let's see. It has a specific meaning. So we should be, and that's probably a problem with regards to performance, because we're going to try to find XUIDs for a specific using and type that are so with this syntax, we know that it's the attach property syntax. And we're going to try to figure out from the full keys which are attached properties. So we can't just, for performance concerns, look up, do a linear lookup on the resource keys to get all the usings that are specific to one UID name. But we could probably do something, like a second hash table or something like that will make that lookup a bit faster. Because this one is just a, it's actually, wow, that one is already slow. We're already looking up keys linearly, which is already a problem. So we already have a performance problem at that location. So we're looking for resource keys linearly, and we have a lot of them in Uno, because they are, when we look at that, when we're building Uno for itself, we have a lot of keys, so we could probably have some improvements there. Okay, so we're going to do a simple linear lookup for now to just prove that we can actually do the implementation, and then we're going to change how we do some lookups, and that one specifically is just not good at all. So we're going to be doing probably a dictionary or maybe a hash set or something like that. We'll see which one we can use. Okay, so let's go back to the invocation of this method, which is not that one. I guess maybe this one. There it is. Okay, so we have find localizable properties. So the find localizable property should probably yielding other types, other localizable properties for that type, but given the UID. So either we make a second one, probably should be better to make a second one. So where is that method? Probably, yeah, it's really far away. So we're going to be providing the XUID as well. So let's give the UID, and then we're going to be looking for properties, so keys that are starting with a specific UID, and then we're gonna parse the content out of the string to find which one we need, and then we're going to be adjusting all the lookups because they're not good. They're definitely not good enough. So we have resources, and we want to find all the keys that are, so let's see, does Copilot give me something that's useful there? Does it read my mind? Not anymore. That's too bad. Sometimes it's giving interesting answers that are related to the current solution, which is interesting. Okay, so we want to find something that looks like UID plus a slash. Key. Okay, so in this case we have all the keys that start by that UID, and the format of the resource keys is and that's one that we saw just before. The format is object UID. So the format is the one that we find that method, which is the UID name slash, then using column, the namespace, then the type slash the member. So we're gonna be splitting this, and what's probably gonna be happening is that we're gonna have to make a structure out of this, so we do parse it properly at the beginning. So when we're creating those keys, because we're using strings in that case, so it matches for that specific lookup, because that's fine, but probably not useful when we're making a more advanced lookup, because we want to find all the types for a specific UID and the members associated to it. So I'm gonna have to figure this one out. Okay, so we have all the keys. And then what we want to find now is, so we have to split the key. And we just want to split with slashes. So let's put the original format here. So we're splitting with slashes, and we don't want empty entries. So that one is annoying because you were using the net standard API and it doesn't have the split with just a one character. Then so we have that part. We will be having the namespace and the type, so we're probably going to be splitting that part to remove the using and the ending column. So let's do if parts is so we have if we have 3 parts, otherwise we're going to fail. And change that afterwards. And so we have 3 parts, then we can split that part. So I'm just going to do that for now, but actually, so that's interesting. Maybe we should be parsing that before, but the thing is that that string is coming directly from the resw file. So we're not going to be parsing that ahead of time. So we need to do it every time. Maybe we can do it just once, because if the property is already there, maybe we're going to be parsing the key multiple times, which is probably not what we want to do. Because we're going to have multiple keys with the same XUID, so we're going to be resplitting the string multiple times. Okay, so let's do it for now here and see if the whole solution works, and then we're going to be refactoring a little bit to get to the right namespace. So we have the using here, we have the type, and what's interesting here is that the type we have the namespace, but we're looking for the namespace. But what's interesting is that the type is directly in front of the using, and it would have assumed that we get something different. So we have, yes, so we have the type, then the dot. So the type is just immediately in front after the bracket. So Visual Studio is doesn't like what I'm doing. Okay, so most of the things here are not good. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna be splitting this. Would have wanted to avoid regular expressions, but maybe, yeah. Okay, so the first part is the UID, and the UID we don't need. The second part is the type name. And the last part is the property name. And so we need to now parse that one to be something a bit different. So to get that, we need to remove the using in front. So we can do a substring out of this, and then a split afterwards because we don't know where the location of the second one is. So it will be Yeah, it's not particularly pretty at this point, but let's figure it out afterwards. So we have the type name here, and we're going to split it again, this time using the closing bracket. Let's type name parts. And so once we have this, I mean, I'm always torn by this, that kind of lookups. Should we do substrings, or should we do regular expressions to make sure that we are matching the right thing? So regular expressions are a bit more expensive, but they're easier to read. This one is a bit fragile because it uses strings like this. Not particularly good either. And then we're splitting, so we have to validate that the parts are the right ones, but we're creating intermediate strings, so that's not good either. And the thing is that we're getting a string that's out of the ResW file, so we have to do the string splitting in that context. So that's unfortunate, but that's how we have to do it. So if type name parts is 2, then we're going to get the 2 parts. So the first one is the actual type name. So we got the type name part 0, and we have so it was actually the namespace. Actually, I could probably, because we have a using, and then we could probably just use a dot instead. So we replace that one with a actually, let's replace that. We don't need to split it again, because it's just a replace. We have we can replace that with a dot. So we get namespace dot type, and that is something that we can look up in the metadata engine. So let's say we do get type, and then we can have the get type that returns an actual type. So the type symbol, there we are. So we get the type name, then we get the type symbol out of it. So it has to be valid, actually. Now we do have this type symbol. We can get to the property of that type and return that property. So we can see here that the property, we're looking for localizable properties of that specific object. Now what I don't know is that if we return the property, we're returning it for the specific type, but that property is not existing, so we can't look it up. So it has to be two separate invocations. Now that I think about it. So if I search for that part again, yeah, we have the members here, but the problem is that the property is a string, but yeah, if the owner is an attached property, so the owner has to be the attached property provider. So we can't use we can't make it a part of find localizable properties, because the object that's returned is not the localizable property. So we have to make something different. Okay, so let's split that method into a second one. So we can remove the XUID here because it's not useful. We don't need the type here because it's not part of the, we're not looking for specific properties on the type. We need to find properties that are localizable for attached properties on a specific UID. So find localizable attached properties for the specific UID, and we're searching for those keys. So we have the type symbol, which is the right one, and we also need the actual property which we do have. So we have the member name here. So we can return. So what do we return? Let's go for tuples for now. It's going to be I name the type symbol. Owner type. And we want to have also a string property. Probably gonna have to restart Visual Studio because I've lost most of the. Oh yeah, it looks like a process just had died. Okay, so let's see. Let's see if we close the solution. Does it work again? So we go for the unit tests again. No, still failing. Probably gonna have to restart Visual Studio completely. Yep. Okay, let's restart Visual Studio completely. Okay, so let's see if we have our coloring. There we go. We have coloring appearing again. Okay, so this time we return, we yield return a type symbol, which is the dependency property type. And also we return the property name. So here we have another exception. And we specify the full key. Okay, so that's it, and then that will do before later on. So we go back to our second lookup. This time we need to make a separate one because we can't use the exact same one. So let's do candidate. We want to find attach properties for the object UID. And then loop again to get, it's pretty much doing the same thing, except that the null here becomes prop.owner. Actually, I don't know what that one does. Why is it a... Oh, okay. Okay, there you go. So we have the owner type first, and then we have the property name. So it will be property here. So let's call it candidate. There we go. So it doesn't want an owner. It wants the owner as part of... That can't work either. Is it has to be a property that's defined in the XAML, so that won't work. Well, maybe. That's interesting. Because in that case, we're saying that the owner should be a XAML definition, XAML member, which is not particularly interesting in that case. The thing is that we're not using owner in any different way. So we're passing the owner as a member definition, but we're actually getting the type, the underlying type using declaring type. But what we really need is the declaring type at that location. So, and we're doing a second lookup, by the way. So that means that we're gonna have to do some optimization in that case. So let's see what happens if we do this. So let's transform this one into a iname type symbol. It has to be nullable. Is attached property really requires to be a member, the same way it does declaring type. In that case, we can do the same. We can do the same method, but using a type symbol instead. So we can just transform this method into one that uses a name type symbol. So is it an attached property? So this is our member here. It's going to be a declaring type. Is it really? It's a member. Yeah, it uses the name specifically, so that doesn't work. So it has to be a declaring type plus a name. So we have to move this to something else. So we have the declaring type here, and we have the string name here. So it will match with the other definition that we we're building before. So we get the declaring type. It's not null, so it shouldn't cause any trouble. Actually, let's keep it nullable in that case. Yeah, no, there's no need. Okay, so we have our type here. The declaring type is the right one. So we can actually just call our is attached property member here directly. So it's our declaring type and the name explicitly. Okay. So we have the declaring type and we have the name of the property that's attached to it, and then it will say, is the property that we're providing it actually an attached property or something else? So let's go for the other location. So we have an owner here and we had the property name. So the member name is above. Member name, we have the owner declaring type. That's the same one. There we go. So that we have to place at the original calling site. So declaring type, let's give the same name for now. We're going to be removing that property, that method afterwards. And then we go to the calling site for this method, and the property. So actually we didn't need that one because it was not called in the same way. But there are some of the locations where actually we're providing a type. Actually there wasn't any, so we can use that one directly. Owner type. Yeah, so we have the owner type directly. And we can look for the object UID. That should be enough. Let's see if it helps. So if it works, we'll see if our test is doing the right thing. So we should be having a green test now that everything builds, given that everything builds properly. Okay, so we still have an error. So we have a XAML member definition. So here we had a localized string here with a member definition. So for this one, we need to have the actual get type. And it must not be null. So let's do a find type first and assume that the owner may be null, which is probably fine in that context. And you can see here that it's the localized string. So if the property type is from a specific attached property, then we go through that specific invocation. think we had a second error. No, we're good. So still build from Microsoft. I think this was added automatically. Should not have been there. That's curious. Sometimes the IntelliSense just starts adding usings at the top because you copy pasted some code from another place, and it determines that the type that you pasted is from some namespace that should be matching. It's not the right one, so you end up having usings that don't make sense. Okay, so it still failed, and it says that actual is null. Okay, so it didn't work. So now let's go take a look at why. So we do have our test here. We still have the generated debugger break, so that's good. I'm just going to be removing the first invocation because we don't want that one. We just want the second one, the one that fails, and we're going to be breaking into the other Visual Studio and see where we can get to for this one, for this specific instance of button. Okay, so we're going to Uno 1, which is the other Visual Studio that is opened. And we are going to break into our find localizable properties. I don't think we have our breakpoint set at the right location. So that one is not valid anymore. So we're going to be breaking above. So we're going to be breaking here. And we say that object UID has to be open videos button. Okay, so let's let it roll. It takes a bit longer because that specific spot is getting invoked quite a bit. But let's see if we get to it. Yep, still building, so that's good. Probably should have been placing the stop here because, you know, if we don't have a UID, then we break at that location without, you know, it's probably not useful. So I think, no, the build's still not finished. Okay, so it didn't catch it. So let's try it again one more time, maybe because I moved the breakpoint in between, so it could be because of that. Or because I didn't use the right breakpoint, maybe. No, it's at the right line, and object UID is of the right type, so it should be good enough. If it still doesn't break, that means that we're failing somewhere else. No, we're failing somewhere else. Okay, so if that that specific one is not hitting, is the object UID using? So it's at the right place. It's the right name. It's open videos button. I changed character files, match source. That's good as well. Okay, let's see if maybe it's the type for some reason that may cause this. That's interesting. So we're looking for find attached properties. Let's see if I break just in all cases, just to make sure that we're actually taking like the right binary for the the generators, maybe it's not reloading the right types. But the breakpoints were working and they were going to the right location, so that should be good. Not like last week where the analyzer were loaded from another location and the symbols were not matching. So in that case, it should be good. Okay, so we're actually hitting that part. So maybe it's just moving the breakpoint. Maybe there was something that was not working there. So let's try again. UID equals our property. If it still doesn't work, maybe there's something completely different that makes it break, because maybe we're not going to... Okay, so we're not getting to that location at all. I wonder, is it because the file is completely different, or because the stack panel is different? Because we should be going through that location. That's very interesting. So we had it before. So maybe there's something else that's happening here. I know that that for some reason, sometimes Visual Studio does some caching during the build of unit tests specifically. So maybe that's the reason why that happens. So let's see if we have something else now. Because it broke, you know, the breakpoint hit the first time, so it should have worked. So we have theme radio buttons. That hits there. Or maybe I'm not placing it at the right location. Maybe it's because it's on the for each. I don't, you know, that's very odd. Okay, so that doesn't work. That's super odd. Yeah, maybe I'm missing something. If some of the viewers are are seeing something that I'm not seeing, let me know, because it feels really strange that I'm not hitting that breakpoint. Because we're looking at that button, so it's at the right location. Maybe it's because it wasn't a for each, but I would think not. Or maybe there's another exception somewhere that makes it break, but the build is working properly. Or maybe there's a XAML part, because there's a XAML parsing exception, so maybe it's failing for something else. Maybe that's the reason that happens. Maybe I broke something in that one, but I don't see what I would have broken, but see, no, okay, so there's an exception that happens somewhere at the beginning, so maybe that's why it happens that way. So it says an error, not enough parts. There you go. Okay, so that's why. Okay, so it's failing because of another parsing. Okay, so not enough parts. So it says if parts length. Yeah, okay, so that happens. So we're trying to parse, and if they're not 3, we're failing, but it's not supposed to happen. So there may be just UID and 2 parts, because there's UID and member name. That's it. That's why it fails. Okay, so let's try it again. So if we go back to our test here and we do a rebuild, it's going to be recreating rebuilding the generators. So you notice that the build actually has shown the exception that happened for that specific build. And we could find that the original issue was coming from the fact that we had thrown an exception at that location, and it shouldn't have happened. So this time we may break that location again. Okay, so there we go. So we're on the UID. We're in the tooltip. That's good. So we have 3 parts. We have 6 parts. Okay, so that's not good at all. Okay, so why do we have that many? The key is... Oh, the dots are replaced with slashes. Well, that's not good. Oh no, that's not gonna work. It looks like we were doing something like this with localized values here. We're replacing dots with slashes, but it's not particularly useful. Okay, so that doesn't work. That probably means that we're gonna have to make a separate parser for this, for the resource keys at the top, try to find resources that are matching a specific UID instead of doing something else. So let's go to the location where we are generating that resource key name. So we're in the generator. The resource keys are coming from the outside, and we probably should be having something that's more explicit. Okay, so let's go to the generation of this. We have the resource keys here, and the resource keys are generated from get resource keys. And we're loading up the documents, and we're replacing a lot of things in there with slashes and dots and others. And modifying all this is not going to fit in the hour. So that means that we're going to continue next week. And it looks like we have to do something about the resource keys and the resource files. So we're parsing the files to have something that's a bit more structured than just strings, so that we can parse the right content and not have to do some string splitting and missing types and others that we're not getting properly at that location. Okay, so that's it. This was an interesting discovery, the fact that we're not doing anything properly with the resources, but we know that if we now set the tooltip service to something that is already defined, then it will work properly. So that is going to be added to the original issues as a workaround, so that people know that they can use that instead of not having their tooltip properties not localized. And that's it for today. So I hope you liked it, and I will see you next week. Until then, happy coding. Bye for now.